Oh, maybe we're not on.
Aha.
Here we are.
Coming back to the reality. To James's reality.
Okay, so I guess we are live, which means I should say welcome to another Eventide Quarantide with my friends, Kasim Sulton, Mark Egan, and Will Lee. Hi, guys.
Hey, man.
Hey, everybody.
So, I guess I should say, why don't you guys, rather than me do it, why don't each of you tell us a bit about who you are for the 3 people in America who don't already know. So, Kasim, why don't you tell us something about you?
Bass player, singer, sometimes multi-instrumentalist. Most known for my work with the band Utopia and Todd Rundgren and Meatloaf and Joan Jett and Patti Smythe and Patti Smith. And my list isn't as long as Will's, but it's long. Yeah, and solo artist, singer-songwriter, American icon, jet-setting international pop star.
And man of mystery, yes. And Mark?
Hello. I'm a bass player also. We're all bass players here. This forum is all bass players. I'm a bass player. I live around the New York area. I'm in Connecticut, actually, where we're broadcasting here today from. And yeah, just been on the New York scene, played with a lot of different people, from Pat Metheny to Sting to, you know, you can check out my website, markegan.com. But anyway, that's basically what I am. I also love to fish. I'm near the water here, so I've been fishing a lot. You know, I love the outdoors. I love the water, diving. So,
Are you a diver as well?
yes.
I know Will is too. Me too. Kaz, do you dive?
I had once.
We could turn this into a scuba forum instead. It would be probably much more interesting.
It was fascinating, actually. It was a little scary because I'm not so much claustrophobic, but 35 feet down, and you just get the feeling that you're being crushed.
Yeah, well, you got to learn to equalize is the thing. But anyway, enough diversions. Will?
Yes.
Yes, I'm a guy who's dreaming of diving right now.
I know it.
I love it. As you can see by my background, my virtual background, which is kind of where I am anyway. I'm in the islands. And I was actually having a scuba dive that was planned for tomorrow, but one of the people had to go do something on a neighboring island. So we're going to skip it for a minute. Yeah, I guess maybe to the genital pubic, I'm known as the maybe a guy from the Letterman show, which I consider to be, you know, Paul Schaefer and the band, the probably the most visible cover band ever for the longest time. So we did the Letterman show for like 33 years, and I've probably played in a couple of thousand albums, you know, here and there. That's been my New York scene since 1971 when I came to town, when I had to leave Mark Egan back in Miami for him to pick up the pieces and become the great bassist that he is.
Oh, Will.
When I left you, Mark, you were a trumpet player.
Yes, I was transitioning. As
Yeah. And I'd been a trumpet player for years in junior high, high school, went to French horn, found my way home to bass, you know. It's interesting, bass, you know, this is back in the 60s, late 60s. It was a time when the bass guitar was new enough that, you know, you didn't think of, could I be a bass major in college? And that sort of came up later in my college career, which was very short, but I had started as a guy who was playing gigs on bass at night, but never thought I could get away with being a bass major at school by day. So I stuck with French horn and blah, blah, blah. And I was so awful at it that a very kind guy at the University of Miami said, you know, I noticed you play bass and I think that should be your major. And I said, you can do that? And that was it. So then it got really interesting for me. Then all of a sudden school like got really colorful and I started to really enjoy myself, you know. And then I got a call to come to New York City, and that's where I've been ever since.
But let's take a step back from that, because one thing I did want to talk about is, so what you said, you were already playing bass in a band, in a bass in a band at night. So what drew you to the bass guitar as opposed to guitar or drums? Assuming, what kind of band was it? Was this a rock band or a jazz band or what?
The Beatles drew me
Right.
to music, period.
Right. And was it them that you just looked at Paul and said, I want to be a bass player?
You mean Paul McCartney?
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, I was a drummer, and you know, kids are 11-year-old kids my age, you know, there were nobody playing bass. So I said, man, we got to get this a professional sound. We got to get a bass player. And then we didn't know any. So I said, well, I'll just go play bass and we'll get a drummer. Worst mistake of my life. But I've been whacking away at it ever since.
And Mark, how about you? What drew you to the instrument?
You know, I was originally, as Will said, I was a trumpet player originally all through elementary school, high school. I started playing professionally in R&B bands around South Boston, playing trumpet in the trumpet sections. And but during that time, I was really attracted to bass because, like in the 1967, 68, 69, you know, all the music that was on was Motown music and Hendrix and Cream. And for some reason, even though I was a trumpet player and up in the higher end of the spectrum, sonic spectrum, I focused in on bass. For some reason, I just listened to the bass lines, and I really, so much so that I bought a bass. It was a Delray bass, I think, and I had a Supro amp, which I wish I still had. It's a nice amp.
Page secret.
And I took a couple lessons with a guitar player named Michael Lally, who's from Brockton, Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. And he got me right into it, right into playing scales and chord forms and the patterns across the neck, like from a guitaristic point of view, which was really helpful. So for me, that was it. And then when I brought my Supro bass and my Delray bass and the amp down to Miami with me, and one thing led to another, and I gradually was working more on bass than I was on trumpet, and I switched my major to trumpet. So it was just out of the love of it. There was one big turning point. I went to the Brockton Fair in Brockton, Massachusetts, and they had a fair every year, and the Supremes played at it. And they were up on a riser. I was just standing right there, and I stood right in front of the bass player, and I felt like I was a bird dog. I was just pointing the whole time. And just, it wasn't Jameson playing. I don't know who the bass player was, but it changed me, you know. It really was profound. So anyway, that's
yeah. It'd be fascinating to know who that was.
It would be. It was the traveling guy, and I don't know who it was, but he was playing all of Jameson's lines, and
yeah, well, which isn't easy.
No.
What a lesson.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Kasim?
At the Brockton Fair, you know, there was you had the Supremes, and then a little bit further down, there was a freak show, a real freak show with freaks. But that's not politically correct, but
define freaks.
Yeah. No, but guys without any arms or legs, and you know, it was weird, but it was great.
Yeah, well, those were the A&R people who had signed this. And Kasim, how about you?
Well, I started out as a guitar player. And like Will, I watching television February of 1964, and that's what I'm going to do. That's exactly what forget about everything else. I know what I'm going to do. It was
as simple as that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly my story as well. It's like, there's the Beatles. I'm 10 years old. I went, that's it. Yeah.
I'm done. Yeah. No thought about it after that. And a couple of 3 years later, my dad bought me a guitar for Christmas, a couple of Christmases after that. And I was a rhythm guitar player, lead guitar player, whatever you want to call it. A couple of guys moved into the neighborhood around me from Brooklyn. Right? I'm on Staten Island. They were guitar players. They wanted to start a band. They said, well, you know, would you like to be in the band? And I said, absolutely, because they happened to be kind of good for 1968 or whatever year it was. And they said, okay. I said, yeah, I'm a guitar player. And they said, we don't need a guitar player. We need a bass player. I said, and like us, it's like, yeah, I can do that. It's no problem. So I became a bass player, sold the guitar that my dad bought me, a 1962 Gretsch double anniversary.
All right.
And I sold it at We Buy for $50 and bought a Gibson EBO and became a bass player at 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's how I started my bass career.
Nice.
Right. Well, I'm sure Will knows, but you guys know the quote when they told Paul that they needed him to switch over to bass. He said, "Okay, I'll do it, but I'm not going to be the fat guy who stands in the back."
Right.
But I have almost a mirror of your story, Kasim, that 12, I guess, the Beatles are on television, and I almost immediately found myself in a band of other bad playing 12-year-olds playing nothing but Beatles songs, and I wanted to be Paul. It was as simple as that. And in years after that, I found myself sort of slipping into playing guitar in bands. And then at that point, my career sort of transitioned more into being in the studio and producing and engineering. And then recently, it's 15 or 17 years ago now, I found myself back playing bass guitar at least half the year and touring with Cyndi and that sort of thing.
Where did you grow up, Bill?
Well, up until I was 9 or 10 years old, 9.5 years old, I grew up in England. And then my parents moved to New York, and I've been sort of here ever since.
So you started playing bass here?
Yeah.
In New York, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
So
Funny how all four of our stories are about transitioning.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I'm transitioning into being a woman now.
Ah, you look beautiful, baby.
Yes, you are absolutely lovely.
So what were you guys doing before the big lockdown, and what do you find yourself doing now, more or less? Someone go.
Okay, well, pretty much 2 days before we fled the U.S. to come down to the islands where I am, I played I'm calling the last concert ever in New York, which was Love Rocks, that I'm musical director for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really beautiful concert, and they had just limited that very day. They had limited rooms to no more than 500 people, and it was a sold-out gig at the Beacon Theater. And they decided at the last second, and I don't know how they pulled it off, but they decided to stream it instead and have like invited friends and family in the audience to give some kind of an atmosphere of liveness, because we're up there playing, with Josh Stone and Jackson Brown and Macy Gray, and I can't even think of half the people that were on this gig. It was really, really great. As this was happening, some people in the room were undiagnosed COVID-19 carriers.
Whoa.
And many people, within a week or two after that, got really sick. Some got less sick than others. Some got sick. And, nobody's fault, of course, because nobody knew what was happening. And I feel lucky that, that we were able to. It was going to go away. And within 5 minutes, the producers were so smart to incorporate like a team of camera people and directors and stuff that could bring gear in at the last second and turn it into a streaming thing and still enable it to happen so that it could function and do the thing that it was going to do, which is raise money for this great organization called God's Love We Deliver in New York City, who feeds like 8,000 homeless, not homeless, but shut-ins a day. And they're still at it. They've been going on since 1985, since the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. So it's a miracle that they do what they do, but they really need the funds, to do it. So the fact that we were able to pull off the concert, and the people who had bought the tickets and donated, some large donors were involved. They all at least got to see the concert, even if they couldn't be at the concert. So, you know, thank God it was able to happen. And, you know, and as it was happening, of course, just like all you guys, our upcoming gigs were falling like dominoes, one after the other, you know, and you could just see like 1 month from now, okay, those gigs are gone. 2 months from now, okay, now I see those gigs are gone. 3 months, and it, you know, now as we're going along, we're hoping that they come back because we love playing live and we love playing together. And you know, it's kind of unpredictable. It's really up to how people behave with the masks and stuff, and it's just amazing how people are not behaving. To me, it's incredible.
It is incredible, but it's hard to imagine so far how it's going to work. Like, it's bad enough. Well, I shouldn't say bad enough. I mean, you can think of ways where we could be safe relatively on stage and in the crew, but I don't know how you are one of 3,000 people, or let alone 15,000 people in an arena. It's like that kind of thing I don't see happening again for quite a while. It's just, there's just doesn't seem to be a reasonable way to do it. I think streaming live shows and that sort of thing is going to be the way for a while, don't you think?
Yeah, for now, yeah. Until
It's funny. It's funny. We played it was a Broadway Cares benefit, or it was an Alan Cumming related benefit about a week before your show at the Beacon, and it was just before sort of all hell broke loose. And it's weird how in that week it really went from, you could sort of we got away with it, and then a week later, as you say, there were infections happening in the crew, and it just, we got lucky because by a week later, as you say, everything was closing up.
Well, yeah, we were pretty much, a lot of us were, I guess all of us were gigging up until the cutoff point, you know. We didn't know what was happening. I mean,
right.
we knew.
In part, they weren't telling us, were they?
Right, we knew what we knew.
Yeah. How about you guys? You guys were playing right up until?
Which guys?
Mark?
Yeah, I did a tour on, let me see, March 2nd, I did a tour in Ireland with a great trumpet player from Ireland, Lindley Hamilton. Adam Nussbaum was a drummer. And it was a great band. And that was right when things were starting to happen, like the 2nd, 3rd to the 9th. And we just finished that tour. And it was starting to really break out. And I remember how nervous I was being in the airport in Dublin coming home, because I was standing in a big long line before customs and someone sneezes, you know. So, and people weren't wearing masks, and it was very uncomfortable. And when did they shut things down? Was it mid-March or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mid to end of March, yeah.
Just as it was really breaking loose. As a matter of fact, where we played in Dublin near the university, there were 44 cases that just broke out. We were about 2 blocks away from that. So, you know, it was a very, the music was amazing on the tour, but it was, towards the end, it was really difficult. But that was the last tour for me. And then, so since then, I've just been in my studio and doing a few projects and riding it out. And like we were talking about earlier, you know, doing virtual things. Yeah, until there's a vaccine, I think all bets are off. You know, I'm not going anywhere. So
yeah, that's how I feel. I think we're all of the age anyway that it's, you know, it's relatively risky. It's like I don't want to be the pioneer, much as I'd like to play and like to get back to doing sessions and all that. It's just, you know, I think you got to be realistic about the risks, and the risks are, as we can see, the curve going up all over the country. The risk is real.
Yes.
I was in the middle of a tour. I was in Chicago, actually.
Your solo tour.
Yeah, I started on February 28th in New York, and we were working our way to the Midwest. And I guess it was the 17th, the 16th or something like that. We played in Chicago. We had a show the next day in Edmonds, Illinois, which is right by St. Louis. And we didn't know if we were going to do that show. At the last minute, the city council allowed us to play the show in a small theater. And I remember distinctly at the end of the show, we still had Atlanta, Nashville, Virginia, another New York show, and a Pennsylvania show left to do, and one other show too, I think. You know, I usually go out afterwards and meet people, you know, meet the fans in the lobby. I don't do a meet and greet so much as just I go out and shake hands and stuff like that. I didn't want to shake anybody's hand.
Sure.
You know, I didn't want to hug anybody or, you know, throw my arm around to take a picture with them.
So I guess a little kiss was out of the question.
Yeah. Well, that was okay, actually. It's okay. Holding hands, I won't do.
That's
But
That was the mild version of that joke, over where that joke could have gone.
yes, well, I'm trying to keep it clean.
Yeah.
but and then you know, I was supposed to start a tour with Todd in April, and that got pushed to July, which got pushed to January. Whether we will do it in January remains to be seen. But
Good luck.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we were supposed to play at the Democratic Convention or a related event, and that's clearly not happening.
Wow.
That's in August, yeah.
Well, yeah, it was originally July, then it got pushed to August, and now it's a virtual convention anyway. So,
Are there any Fab Faux gigs booked, Will?
It's all very virtual, you know, like we have these dates and they're floating in space and they're locked in, but there's no reason to think they're secure, you know, because they have been moved several times and they just keep moving down the line. So we'll see, you know.
This year or next year?
Well, believe it or not, there's still some booked for this year. And it's really booked. When I say booked, I'm sure that, you know, I'm pretty sure I can almost feel what's coming. I think it's still really just on paper.
right. When you say feel what's coming, mean they're probably not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, promoters haven't said it's off yet, but you know, I don't know, for whatever reason, they're just waiting it out. It's just not fair to the audience to keep these things, you know, to expect people to risk their health to hear some.
Exactly. More them than us. It's not fair.
Right. Exactly.
So let's move on to talking about, somebody mentioned just doing remote projects, and are all of you doing some recording? I guess Kaz is sitting in a proper studio, so obviously does, but all of you doing recording at home and remote recording, as it were, where people send you a track and you'll put bass or vocals on it, and everybody sings too, right? So are you, and how are you? Will? Maybe not so much there, right?
Well, you know, actually I have done some, but kind of reluctantly, because the gear that I ended up having sent down here kind of in an emergency kind of way is not really my optimal stuff. So I'm trying to ask people to wait until July when I get to a place where I have better stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of projects. As soon as I land at my next stop, I'll be, you know, doing a whole bunch of different albums and stuff for people. But really, I've really been enjoying, I have to say, and I'm the king of procrastination, and I always will be, especially when it comes to writing lyrics, but I've really been enjoying getting to some songwriting that is so easy otherwise for me to put off doing, because the daily whatever it is I do seems to come in handy when it comes to me getting down to business and finishing songs. I have a million songs started, but I kind of never finish anything because I get excited about the next new thing.
Mm-hmm. But
lately I've been trying to really dig in and finally finish some stuff. And I'm starting to I've always felt like I had a songwriter somewhere inside of myself, but I'm my own worst enemy, and I let all my insecurities tell me that that's not good enough always. So it never gets done. And I've kind of decided that, okay, look, if this idea can mean something to somebody, or if it can help somebody, or if it can at least entertain somebody, those are the sort of two motivating things that I'm working with right now, as far as what do I want a song to do?
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, it's all very, I call it, you know, anytime I get into working on my own material, I call it a vanity project, which is already, again,
Yeah.
one more
You're
step
already
of
putting it down.
whacking my own mole. You know, I'm the mole and I'm whacking it, and it never gets done because I'm always putting the kibosh on everything. It's not good enough, like Sam Breakstone in the sour cream. Not good enough. But you know, I don't know. I try to find pieces of material that I'm working on that I think might have something to them because they won't get out of my head. So the ones that I wake up in the middle of the night with or first thing in the morning with, those are the ones that I tend to want to stick with because I feel like maybe they're the ones that, for some reason, if they're haunting me that much, maybe there's some validity. Maybe I should continue working on that piece of music. So I'm really trying to get some songs done. And then I'm incorporating people to do remote sessions for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, friends who have setups and stuff, you know. And everybody wants to make music, so it's kind of
Right.
groovy.
I always find it's much easier, although it's not in some ways it's not my preferred way, but it's easier to write with someone because you have someone else. When you say, oh, I don't know about this, if someone says, no, that's good, then you feel okay about it in a way that it's hard to tell yourself sometimes it's good enough.
Would
But
you
then,
be
of course,
that
you have to
person
deal with
for
other
me?
people's opinions.
Would you
Sorry?
be that person for me?
Exactly.
I need somebody to say, well, you know, I don't need a John Lennon because I'm not a Paul McCartney. I don't need a John Lennon to say, it sucks. But
you do. But you need a John Lennon, even if it's not John Lennon. You need somebody. You know, when McCartney says, you know, the movement you need is on your shoulder. Oh, I'll get rid of that later. And Lennon says, no, you won't. It's like you do need that in a certain sense. I mean, sometimes that's what a producer does. But again, sitting on your own in your messy room, it's hard to do that for yourself. It's why I think it's always better to just sort of get through it, and I can always go back and fix it if I need to later. But if you finish it first, you're more likely to fix it than if you stop yourself, you know?
you caught me off guard with that phrase, all alone in my messy room. I like
Yeah.
that. All alone in my messy room.
Yeah. Plague after plague.
Right.
Yeah. And so, Mark, you're also doing, you said you were doing you do remote recording as part of your normal workflow anyway, even pre-plague, right?
Yeah, actually, you know, life is in some ways very much the same as it's always been because I spend a lot of time in my studio, you know, and so, but I really miss the interaction. I miss hanging with my friends, with my bros and my sisters, you know. But I've worked on a few projects. A guitar player named Reza Khan, I did a record with him. We actually did the tracks in Spain. We brought them back, and then I basically redid all my tracks because I couldn't take listening to myself. And then did some solos and things. So that was a big project that I did. I also did with a big band. And Will, you might have played Dan Bonsanti's big band. Have you played any tracks for him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did one with Peter Erskine. It was a Ronnie Miller song. And so I did that. Peter sent a track, so that was a lot of fun. And I'm in the process of producing a duo record, bass and drums, with Danny Gottlieb, my partner in crime for so many years with Pat Metheny and
Cool.
our own group called Elements. And so we had started this duo record a few years ago, and we finally, I wanted to just go in at the perfect time to finish it because there's no distractions, you know, and I can just get it done. So that's something that just came out. Actually, it's my first foray into vinyl, even though we always did vinyl records before, but I'm producing it on my label. So I have a little record label called Wave Tone Records, and I've had it since 1993. I have 25 releases on it. It's a vanity label, like Will said, vanity.
That's some good stuff on Planet Waves.
Thanks. And so this is another one for that, and it's going to be called Electric Blue. I'll give you a little plug for that. It's Mark Egan, Danny Gottlieb, Electric Blue. I actually have the cover right here. Can I?
You've come prepared to market, yeah.
Jeez.
I like it. Yeah.
Oh, that
Excellent.
looks so cool, man.
That's great.
So yeah, it's all original stuff. We wanted to document our duo playing, just because we played, as we all know, everyone here playing with drummers is the whole thing, the drums and bass. To me, playing with everybody, but you develop a rapport with drummers, and
Or at least a rapport.
it's a rapport. And Danny and I have played in so many different bands together and done so much, early on with the Pat Metheny group and then with our own groups. And it was something we always wanted to sort of just the legacy of that. So it's very exposed, and it's songs and improvisations, but it's
And
actually,
is it strictly duo, just two of you on the whole record?
it's a duo. It's drums and bass.
Right.
I did some overlaying of some bass parts, like some harmony, and but it's all bass and all drums. So
Nice.
yeah. So I've been busy doing that, and just doing other things that I wouldn't normally do, like just playing some piano, practicing guitar, trying to learn some bossa nova type guitar playing and playing along. There's so many True Fires, a great website where they have a lot of lessons where you can just go. And so I've been doing that, and I sort of go in and out of disciplining myself and saying, okay, this morning I'm going to do, an hour guitar, hour piano, and then whatever. And then I'm going out fishing, and then I'm going to come back, and then I'm going to do more. So I waft in and out of that type of discipline now. So
Yeah, someone in the chat was asking how everybody keeps their chops up. So you're sort of touching on that. So I mean, you just sort of playing along to stuff and finding a way to
yeah, and
expand your horizons a little.
Yeah, it really is such a golden time for musicians and artists and anybody that is trying to perfect their artistry, whatever it is. And so it's very rare that you get this much concentrated time to be able to really focus on. There's no excuse, you can't say, well, I got to do this, I got to do that, even though you can say that. But it's a great time to, like, for me to just find out areas that I know that I'm weak in and try to get better at them. And now with the internet and with YouTube, you can find anything, if you want to get better at whatever it is. So that's what I've been doing on bass, just to keep chops up. And I actually play along with records. That's been good for me. Not only just records that I love, but also with this jazz play along Jamie Aebersold records. I have 100 volumes of every possible song in the world. So that's been good, just to keep the chops going.
And Kasim, you obviously record from home. You did something for me remotely recently, so I know you do.
But mainly I've been cooking.
Yeah, me too. We could get into that, scuba diving and cooking.
Completely into cooking every day.
Yes.
But which I love. I love to cook. But I mean, and I'm being serious too. I've just finished. I just finished a record. I finished a record with Phil Thornalley, producing and co-writing, and I'm very, very proud and excited of it. And I mean, a record, like Will said before we came on live, it's like a record. What's that?
Did you do it all remotely, or had you started?
No. I spent a few months in London with Phil at his place, and then we did whatever we don't do when I'm over there together. We do remotely. He'll send me tracks. I'll send him tracks. I'll send him takes, much like we did on that project that you and I are working on, or that we worked on. I have a radio show as well. I have a terrestrial radio show.
Oh, where's that?
Every Sunday night at 7 p.m. on WDST in Woodstock, New York. I have a 1-hour show called It's My World and Welcome to It. And it's part talk, part music. I play a bunch of kind of obscure records, records that we've heard and records that that kind of slipped under the radar. It's a bunch of segments, like I do one from the US and one from the UK. A classic album opening and closing, like what track opens a record, what track closes a record. I usually start the show out with a Utopia song and finish with one of my solo songs.
That's cool. So now we know where to get all of our vanity projects played on the radio.
You send them along. I'll run them up the flagpole and see what flies. Yeah, I mean, I'm having a great time doing that stuff. And, you know, like I mentioned before we came on, you know, I don't know when I'm going to release my record. I'd like to think sometime this year, but it's also important to go out and be able to play live and, you know, and promote it in front of an audience and see what songs, what audience reacts to which songs and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I made a I guess it's a solo record. I mean, it has guests on it, but I made a record of it was covers of all hits of 1964. The jumping off point was kind of weird, but anyway, I ended up making this record. But it's the same thing. It's like I'm sitting on it because I don't realistically want to just be another needle in a haystack of stuff that comes out on the internet, and who cares, you know?
Yeah.
It's really difficult if you can't go out and find some way to promote yourself.
I mean, stuff usually doesn't stick around that long anyway. These days. You know, you're here today, but you're around for a couple of 3 weeks, and then it's the next thing.
Unless you get really lucky, yeah.
But yeah, unless you get lucky. But you know, it's even harder now because everybody's attention is kind of focused elsewhere, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, for good reason too.
For good reason, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, if just slight change of subject, let's talk about recording bass in general. And all of you guys have done the sort of in a band thing and the studio guy thing and the record yourself thing. And, you know, you've had a lot of experience of going different places. I'm talking about sort of pre-plague, that, you know, going to studios and being recorded by people. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any feelings about that. Good. Did you have places you prefer to record, or people you prefer to record you, or ways you like to record? Thing about that, thoughts about direct deck versus amplifiers or instruments you might bring, or just any thoughts about your approach to old session. You want to start, Kasim?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because just on the record that I'm talking about, the record that Phil and I just finished, there was one session I did over at his place. He has a really lovely studio in St. John Wood. And it's very comfortable. It's in like a kind of an artist studio, you know, and he's got a bunch of, you know, it's a recording studio. And
it's not called Abbey Road by any chance, is it?
It's just down the block. It's just down the block.
St. John's is not very big. It would be, yeah.
I was trying to show my hipness that I know where that is.
William is.
And so that we needed a bass part on a song, and he said, okay, just let's plug it in. I plugged a Fender Precision into a Vox AC30, and it was just the most horrible sound that you could possibly imagine by itself. However, in the track, it was perfect. I mean, it was like, it was distorted. It was, if you had played it, you would be like, I can't record that. That's horrible. That's absolutely terrible. But within the context of the track that we were working on, it fit perfectly. So, and I was kind of shocked at that.
It's funny because I actually like bass through at AC30. I'm just always afraid to blow up the AC30.
But this was just so super distorted. What Beatles song is that, Will? Think for Yourself. Yeah, it was kind of,
that's
it was kind of like
that.
Yeah. Think for Yourself. Classic. Is that like a Maestro fuzz or something?
There had to be a fuzz box on.
It is a fuzz. Its credit is a fuzz. It is fuzz bass, but I don't know what the pedal would have been. That's funny. Yeah.
They could have done it any kind.
I'm sure Brian Kehew knows.
Yeah.
You know his book, Recording the Beatles?
Yeah.
Was it him and another guy, right?
Yeah, him. Yeah. But Brian is my friend, so I never remember the other guy.
Another guy named Ryan. Something Ryan.
Andy Babuke would know too.
You would, yeah.
Let's see.
Where'd you go, Bill? Oh, he's going to get the book.
Bill!
Oh.
That's it. He's definitely going to get the book.
Yes. The giant.
You know, you can't get that book anymore.
Yes, you know, they're coming out with a revised, it has like a third bigger or something, like it's going to be even bigger and more expensive, but you're going to have to get it because you have to have it.
Yeah.
That book is a whole world in itself, man. That, you know, that's a
rabbit hole. Yeah.
The Bible. Yeah.
So, talking about distorted bass, you made me think of a story with Mark that, we recorded on Joan Osborne's album, Relish. There's a song called Right Hand Man that I think about the beginning of that take, we had built a little isolation box with a speaker in it, and we were using my AC 100 head into this speaker box. And a lot of times Mark was sitting on the speaker box, as I recall.
Yes.
But the speaker inside was going, and we didn't really know it. And we did that take. Mark came into the control room. We played the take of the whole band back, and the bass was just totally the entire time. And we just said, fantastic. That's the best bass sound ever. And I think there was some discussion about doing another take, and we went out to do it, and you play, and there was no sound at all. The speaker had completely blown.
That was it.
So,
Yeah.
so it was like, I guess that's the take.
Yeah.
Happy
And that was
accident.
an AC 100, Bill?
It was an AC 100 head and a 15-inch speaker, which was some sort of eminence or something that we then replaced with a JBL because we said, let's not
Right.
shred another. Let's use
I
a
remember
better
the
speaker.
JBL. And what was the microphone on that? It was a
There's an RE20 in there.
RE20. Yep.
So guys, when I first came to New York City, right, I hadn't done much studio work, and there were studios all over town, and you'd go from one to the other. And there was a thing that had established before I got here, and it had called itself I believe it was called the Manhattan Bass Amp Club. Okay, so you walk into a studio and you'd see a B15 flip top amp over in your corner where you were told to sit and play your bass part.
With a lock on it.
With a lock on it.
Yeah.
And the flip top top was facing down into the amp. You couldn't even see the amplifier part of it because it was all locked down and chained down with a padlock on it. And if you were in the club, I guess you had paid your dues, you'd have a key and you would be able to unlock that padlock thing and get to the chains and undo the thing and undo the flip top, and then you'd have an amp. But rather than getting into all that, there were also direct boxes in the room. So me being not a member of the big club, William, I hope you're still here. Your image is frozen. You plug directly in, and I got used to knowing what my sound was going to be based on what that direct box was doing in the phones. So I really got total control of my sound the way I liked it, just with the bass itself. And I got kind of lost in that world, and forever I didn't use an amp in the studio. It sort of meant nothing to me for a really, really long time.
What bass were you using, Will?
I was using the P bass.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, William's kind of signing back on.
Oh,
you back?
exciting. Yes. Sorry about that. I don't know.
Okay, well, it's good to have you back.
Just the pleasure of the internet. Yeah.
Anyway, so I didn't know anything about amps for the longest time. And even as far as like till today, I still wish I could get that direct sound that I was hearing in my phones in the studio through the DI on stage. And I'm always puzzled by, God, I wish I could just get that thing, because to me, that's the thing that I really understand the most, being like pretty much more of a studio guy than anything else, I think, as far as knowing how to record the bass goes and the sound that I'm looking for. It's really based on the bass itself rather than the amp signal or even knowing what to do with the amp. So for the longest time,
that's a whole philosophical thing, though. That's like the difference, right? It's like you wouldn't sound like John Entwistle, Chris Squire. You wouldn't even sound like McCartney that much without the contribution of the amplifier. Yeah.
Right. Well, so what I ended up doing was I would find engineers who loved the whole tubular thing, right? And I love the direct thing. So I would always ask them to, do whatever you want, take a signal and do whatever you want with the tube thing, but feed me the direct thing. So I know exactly what I'm giving you and what and I can pocket better with the drums. Like the grid doesn't have any delay whatsoever, until it goes through the tubes, and then that's when you start to get delay. And I wanted to be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
wanted to live in pocket central land, you know.
Yeah, and of course that's the Motown thing, is that everybody was going direct inject, and then they would process it after the fact to try to give it some character.
Right. And so, you know, years later, you know, it kind of backfired on me. I remember distinctly being in the studio with Gary Moore at this little studio that belonged to Roger Waters outside of Checkendon something, not, you know, it's very close to George Harrison's Friar Park where he lives. And we're doing this record in there in a huge room with a big stone wall, and Anton Fig is the drummer. And he's getting this sound that's so completely massive in that room that all of a sudden my direct thing was like, whoa, wait a second, this is way too puny. This is way too electronic. This is way too cold. And at that point, that was like almost the first time that I said, look, guys, can you set me up an amp in this room, and, you know, just pull the mic a few feet from it or something. And I got to get bigness here. This is crazy, you know.
Yeah.
And that's when I first started to experiment with, you know, really digging into that whole philosophy with, you know, the whole amp thing. And as that, there's that priceless book called Behind the Glass.
Yes.
It was written by Howard Massey, where he interviewed all the engineers and stuff. And he interviewed Jeff Emmerich almost for his first sort of public foray into being in a book and talking about the process in a book, which led to his own book, Here, There, and Everywhere, which is another great book by the same
written with Howard,
by those same pair of guys, Howard and Jeff Emmerich. And in that book, he explains very well how how Paul McCartney they would do the whatever Beatles song they were doing that day. The guys would go home, and Paul had played either piano or guitar or whatever that he had written on, and then stay after school and put the bass part on late into the evening. And he explained about the whole, you know, taking the C12 and the, you know, and the whatever that compressor that they were using, the Altec thing. And, you know, and that's when I really first started to learn about, you know, distance from the amp bottom and all this stuff, and, you know, really valuable stuff.
Yeah, from my engineer geek point of view, the other part of my life, it's like, to me, it's about what the bass lives with. So if you've got a very dry, tight, close electronic bass drum, then you want dry, tight, close electronic bass guitar. But if you've got, as you said, you've got big room full of loud, distant drums, direct inject bass is not going to work so great.
Exactly.
But for me, I have to say 95% of the time, I'm much happier with a B15 and a microphone on it for almost anything. I can make that work. I've never been a big fan of direct inject, although there were those days when you sort of had to do it that way because we were moving so fast, doing 3 jingle sessions in a day or whatever it was. Mark, do you have any feeling about that sort of stuff, recording experiences or preferences?
Yeah, well, I have similar experiences to Will, where a lot of the studio work that I started to do in New York, a lot of it was direct box, and it was really up to the engineer. It was a lot of commercial work, records, and I didn't pay that much attention to the amps, even though I played with amps all the time, you know, live.
Yeah.
But for my own projects, I do like to have an amp and a direct sound and sort of mix the two. It really depends on the ambience of what the music, exactly what you said, you know.
I like to take both and then mute the direct.
Okay. For my projects with my basses, my fretlesses, and with a lot of effects, I tend to like the pristine, crystalline sound of the directs sometimes for certain things that I've used a lot on my own projects. But like when we recorded the Joan Osborne record, I mean, that was an amp. That was it. There was no direct, right?
That's a classic example. I took one for safety's sake, but never used it.
Right. That's what I thought. For the Pat Metheny group, I played through an Ampeg B15 with an RE20 on it.
Yep.
No direct.
My favorite.
Yeah. And that was a 58 precision fretless that Jocko had given to me. Yep.
Wow.
So I go, it depends on the music for me. I go back and forth between what it needs.
Mm-hmm. And Kasim, you're more of an amp guy, I would guess.
You know, I'm more of whatever the song calls for.
Yeah.
And it changes with every band, every record, every song. Like, I think it was Bat Out of Hell. There's a bunch of. It's really funny because my playing on that particular record. I played so much because nobody told me not to, you know, and they don't play that. And I'm listening to it after all these years. I'm like, how did I get away with playing? You know, it's like I'm just like playing lead bass. And that was no amplifier. That was all direct. There was, and I believe I used a Rickenbacker on most of that record.
Oh.
But you know, then there's other records like I did a record with Steve Stevens, which was like if I got paid by the eighth note, I would be where Will is right now. You know, it's just like just eighth notes from the first song until the last song. No amplifier, and just, you know, mute with the palm of your hand and a pick, and that was the sound. Then there are other times when, you know, you want a blend of both of direct and amp. So it just, like I said, it just depends for me on the material, the record, the artist, the song. Yeah.
So have any of you guys played around with, I'm a convert recently to the Kemper profiling amplifier. You guys know about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That, you know, I profiled all my favorite bass amps and my own. I mic them the way I like them. I set them the way I like them. I shoot the profiles, and now I can both record and tour with that. And if I say, oh, this song wants the hi-hat, boom, there's the hi-hat. This song wants the Vox, there's the Vox. This one wants the B15, there it is. Plus, if you do want a fuzz or you want a chorus or you want a drop tune, I mean, it does all that in the box. So it's kind of super convenient.
Wow.
Is that a plugin?
No, it's a piece of hardware. It's an amplifier. It actually has a Class D amplifier in it that's driving a speaker on stage for me too, but it sends, you know, one XLR to front of house and sounds just like my amps mic'd the way I mic them, you know, without any of the hassle. It's kind of great.
Wow, that sounds great, man. Were you designing these sounds yourself, or are they in the box?
It comes with 1,000 sounds, mostly for guitar players, that I don't use. But no, I shoot a profile of my own amp.
How do you do that?
You get the sound you want, you mic it, you feed it into the Kemper, and then you press a button and the Kemper makes these otherworldly sounds that sound like a flying saucer landing loudly. And it's running tones through it's gauging the distortion level and the tonal balance and the
So it's modeling?
distortion.
Yeah.
It's they call it profiling, because modeling is some guy's idea of, oh, this is what an AC30 should sound like. This is actually capturing the profile of the amp you're showing it.
I thought modeling was actually doing what, you know, I guess what the definition of profiling is. I always thought that's what
I guess it's semantic, I guess, but the modelers tend to hand you, you know, like the Line 6 stuff is modeling. It's like, here's their idea of an Ampeg, and that
Right.
You're pretty much stuck with it. In this case, it sounds like my Ampeg, not like Kemper's idea of an Ampeg.
So modeling almost sounds like it's something made under a microscope in a lab compared to profiling, which is actually taking physical properties and incorporating them into the sound.
Yes, exactly. And from your personal choices, which is what, you know, I use even for guitars for recording, I use almost entirely profiles I've made myself or made with Eric Bazillion. The two of us sat and profiled a bunch of stuff.
There are so many great things you can do with bass sound. I mean, oh my God, it's endless, you know, and I've always been fascinated by pedals. I was like maybe the first pedal guy in New York to like do what guitar players were doing and plug basses into pedals and stuff. But as far as amping stuff, I kind of realized lately I've been discovering some other weird, interesting bass sounds, kind of along the lines of what Kasim was saying about that Vox amp and about what you were saying about, recording Mark using that other Vox, that the 100 or whatever. My friend Jürgen Carlson, who plays with Government Mule, has, I don't know if I should be giving this away or not, but anyway, he comes up with these weird bass sounds, and one of the things that I really liked that he discovered was a Fender Junior, a Pro Junior, getting back into like non-bass amps, plugging the bass into that, miking the back of it, and you get this wild ass, fucked up, great rocked out sound that I love.
Nice.
So, and that really goes, that's the polar opposite of going direct. Because now you're not even direct. Now you're in the back of the amp. So you're really going from the back door.
Nice.
And there's just so many great possibilities. And I guess the best thing to do is start out with a good sounding bass. That kind of helps.
Yeah.
And as Jocko said, man, it's all in the fingers, man.
It is those two things more than anything else. So all jokes aside, I mean, if
Placement.
Yeah, but there's no
thing.
If any one of us got a sound on a bass and then handed it off to any other one of us, it would sound different right away.
Yeah,
totally. Yes, no doubt. I got a great example of that from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony when the Who were inducted.
Yeah.
And we're on stage. We're the house band with Paul Schaefer and blah, blah, blah. We did like 28 of those or something. So I see Entwistle coming up to the stage, and I'm going, oh my God, he's going to come up for the jam at the end of this ceremony. And all that's there is sort of a replica of the amp that I was using at the time, Sadowski bass and a Hartke rig. And I thought, oh, poor John, man, how's he going to get his sound out of this stuff, He walks over. And within 5 seconds, he had his sound coming out of that same exact rig. And it was all about what you just said. It's, it's not only him finding it, but it's also when he touches the bass. Yeah. It's instant, the ox.
Mm-hmm.
I had the opposite experience with him that they let me come up after soundcheck and just play his bass on his rig, and nobody said to me how lightly he touches the string.
Oh my God!
I literally played one note, and people like diving under chairs. It was like a bomb had gone off. That it was so much louder because he barely that typewriter thing was based on the fact that, no pun intended, was barely tapping the strings.
Yeah, but that amp volume of his was something to behold.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Didn't he used to use Sun amps way back?
For a while, yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think the last word he ever said to me was, "What?" If I remember correctly.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
God rest him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best. So just a couple of other things to touch on. How about short scales? There's a big trend these days. Everybody's talking about short scale basses. I recently switched for touring purposes to a short scale, in part because it's much easier on my back. I mean, aside from Hofner's, which I think we've all probably played with at one time or another, just because a Hofner's a Hofner. Anybody else enthused about short scales these days?
Crazy about the sound you got out of that bass when I saw you live recently, Bill.
Oh, that was the Little Reverend, remember? Yeah, thank you.
Oh my goodness.
But that's the Kemper.
Kemper, right? I
think a lot of that has to do with that. And see, perfect example that I played most of the show on a B15, but then Money Changes Everything on a high watt, and it's all in that Kemper. But
when you say high watt and B15, you mean virtually.
Yes, but right, exactly. But I profiled my high watts, I profiled my B15.
Really effective. Really effective.
Thank you. But yeah, that's a cool little bass, that Reverend, and light.
I've always wanted a Fender Mustang. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the bass that I got sent down here. I ordered it from Sweetwater while I was down here.
All right. Are you liking it?
No. Oh, did my signal freeze there? What happened?
Do you find it a little hard to keep it in tune?
It's really out of tune. And the first thing I noticed is it shipped with round wounds. round wound
Yeah.
strings. And I was really surprised at how doinky,
Yes.
rubbery.
Yes. You have
and
to use
not
heavier strings.
enough tension. I couldn't get enough tension, But
So
the
what
pitch thing
strings- what
is
strings should you use on it?
Yeah.
You've got to use heavier strings because the scale is shorter. It's just if
Yeah.
you want the same feel, yeah.
got some medium. I ended up putting some medium flats on it, flat wounds, and that's my favorite version of it so far.
Mhm.
What kind of strings are you using these days, Will?
What did I order for flat? I ordered some Rotosound flats for that one. I use Sadowski strings for the most part. Why?
Curious. I've been using using elixirs for years, and I'm a little tired of them.
Do you like it for flat wound stuff?
They don't make a flat wound, so
Oh, really?
I'd have to go elsewhere for flat wounds.
Yeah, I'm a Labella endorser, and I have to say I like their strings. I like their rounds, I like their flats, and I really like their nylon tape wounds, which I have on my Rickenbacker and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah,
Which I'm a bigger fan of the nylons than I am regular flats, I have to say. I'm either round wounds or nylons, but how about you, Mark?
I'm a D'Addario. I play XL 170s, and they're flat wounds.
Are you all flats on everything?
No, mostly round wounds, but I
Yeah.
have a couple bases that I put flats on.
Yeah.
I just got a precision bass, Mulan.
Yeah.
Mulan, yeah, those were nice. I remember the first time Paul McCartney was interviewed by Guitar Magazine.
Yeah.
And this is before there was a bass player magazine, Guitar Player Magazine. And I thought, man, oh, this is great. They're interviewing Paul McCartney. I wonder if they're going to ask him, about gear, because I couldn't wait to find out what he was going to say about it.
I know this story. Go ahead.
Did we talk about this already?
No, but I know
You read it as well?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said silver ones.
Well, what I remember is they said, what kind of strings do you use? And he just said, what I remember reading, it's maybe I was high, but I remember him saying, I don't know. And then they come full to a bag.
That's pretty good too. No, I remember him saying silver ones.
What does a genius care what kind of strings he's got on this? He's going to make music on a rock.
Yeah, but a corollary though is we were somewhere where I saw him in the hallway of a television studio, and I had the Rickenbacker with the tape wounds, and he looked and he went, "Oh, yeah, I used to use those." So who knows?
He always knew what to say. He could always work the room.
Exactly.
In fact, when he got on stage, this is a real aside. When he got on stage, when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he comes up to the stage, and his wife Linda had just passed away pretty recently, so nobody really thought he was even going to be there. But he shows up and he comes up on stage to jam at the end, and as he passed by me, he said, "Oh man, I wish I'd known you were going to be here. I would have brought my lefty Hofner bass, which years later I ended up giving to him." But in his very cute way, he said, "Oh, you really messed up this time." Always knows what to say in the room.
Yeah.
That includes that interview too. That four to a bag thing. I don't know about.
That's pretty good.
What
So
silver ones.
What did he play with the Beatles? What strings do you think?
Well, certainly flats on the Hofner, probably pyramid flats on the Hofner.
Not these days.
No, not these days. Exactly.
Hofner has round wounds on.
I know. How weird is that?
Weird to him.
Well, even weirder, Pino Palladino was playing flats with the Who, so I go figure. But I think on the Rickenbacker it was probably flats, and according to him, to me, sometimes nylons. But I don't know. I think they're mostly flats in Beatle days. You don't hear a lot of growly round wound sound on Beatles records.
Only on the White Album.
The White Album. I was just going to say.
Yeah, but that's mostly he's playing a Fender, right?
The '66 Jazz. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So just a couple of other things to touch on, unless somebody has something they want to say. I have some questions, people, about writing the bass. When you do songwriting, find yourself writing on the bass guitar much, or do you go pick up a guitar or something else, or a bit of both?
It's a great writing thing. Great.
It's great for riff songs. It's great.
Right.
It's really great to come up with a really cool riff on a bass, and then turn that into a song of its own.
Right. You have to hear the chords in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I write a lot on bass. Probably 80% of my own songs are on bass, and then some keyboard, a little guitar, and some just in my head. And that's, yeah, the ratio, I would say.
Yeah, I like to mix it up because I mean, I think, you know, you get different kind of songs out of different stuff. But you're right, Kasim. I think when I write on bass, it's probably more riff oriented rather than straight chord oriented.
You know, I saw an interesting, it was like an autobiography about Woody Allen, and it made a lot of sense to me. When he's getting ready to do a movie, he goes and stays at a hotel, and he brings a paper bag of all these little Did you see that?
No.
He writes down these little one line ideas, and he puts them away. And when he's going to bring a movie, he'll go and he dumps them on the bed, and he picks the best ones that he likes, and he put them over here. And then he works from those, and that's how he gets his ideas for his movies. And in a similar way for my writing, like I always run a tape when I'm practicing or playing in the morning. I have a little memo, and I just say the date and how many beats per minute, whatever, the tempo, and what type of line, what I'm thinking about on top of it. And so I have all these things. And when I get ready to do a record, I sort of listen back to my favorite ones and see which ones sort of fit in to the same sort of concept. And then they become the songs. And I just sort of string them together, you know?
Yeah, well, that's smart. I mean, most of the great writers I've got to work with, I see, sorry about that, keep a notebook, I mean, for lyric ideas, and this is kind of the audio notebook for riff ideas. I mean, that is the smart way to do it, because we always think we're going to remember, but you don't if you don't write it down and record it somehow.
No matter how good the idea is, man, if it's
Yeah.
if you don't write it down, it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's shocking somehow. Sometimes I'm so sure I'm going to remember that later, and it's.
I keep a legal pad next to the bed.
Yeah.
And a big heavy Sharpie, so I can see in the dark. And if I can't see in the dark, I'm just trying to imagine that I'm writing the right stuff, and I hope I can see it in the morning. But you know, those are those ideas that they really count. They really can mean something.
Because they come at a time when you're clear, you know, when you're not thinking about 12 other things.
Yeah.
It's kind of pure, and you have a real feeling and a real thought, and you can attach yourself to it. Yeah.
I find I get a lot of ideas, even if they're tiny little ideas of while I'm driving, because my mind's kind of blank. I'm just paying attention to nothing. And that's when I find Hey Siri is really useful.
Yeah.
Make a note.
Amen. I used to get the best ideas walking my dog.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was that you're serving another living thing, which is also a priceless thing to do in life, but also, or if it was just the mindlessness of it. I never really figured out what that was, but I would get my favorite ideas would come when I was walking my dog.
Yeah, I think it is that what you're calling mindless. It's that sort of alpha state where you're not thinking about anything specific, so you're open to those ether ideas coming in.
Yeah, strange.
Clear.
You know, it inevitably for me, when I sit down and I'm working on a song and I have the initial idea or the initial concept, I always revert to something else, and that becomes a song. It's very interesting. Almost every song I've written is a byproduct of something else that I ditched, you know? It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, knowing what to ditch is sometimes
I heard
helpful thing.
I heard Sting say something about this, about when he gets stuck. When Sting said when he gets stuck, he takes a walk. And I'm sure he has pretty nice property to do that on. But he said there's something about I think he called it the bilateral movement of the left-right thing of just your body doing this thing that sets you into a kind of a state that enables your brain sort of to help itself work together.
Interesting.
You know, and just kind of pushes out the block or the cobwebs and allows you to free up or something.
Is that after 7 hours of tantric sex or before?
Maybe during.
Okay, so one last thing. Somebody asked me, how do you feel about guitar players playing bass?
Well, Paul McCartney.
Well, but except made the switch. I mean, I'm talking about the guitar player in the band thinks he doesn't need a bass player. He can play on the record and play bass.
I think what's worse than that is a bass player who starts playing guitar.
Could be worse than that.
You on.
And that's me.
It's
That's
probably
me.
the same. Yeah.
You know, I like to hear guitar players play bass because from a melodic point of view, not from the groove point of view, but melodically, it's like, whoa.
Fresh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with that. I'm with that. I like the ideas, but I inevitably feel like, okay, now hand it to me or hand it to the bass player and let the bass player play it, because there's something about the touch that never sits quite right.
Right, exactly.
It's a different part of their fingers that they're using, I think, a lot of times, but it's also just the mental thing of, it's just, as you say, it's a pocket they're not used to thinking about, or the durations are always not quite right to me when a guitar player plays bass.
Now, Noel Redding was a guitar player originally, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think so.
Did you say Noel Redding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noel, yeah.
This conversation reminds me of how much I like Hamish Stewart's bass playing. You know, he's a great guitar player.
Yes.
And he plays that short scale Mustang.
Yeah.
With a pick on those records, and it feels so good.
I love Ronnie Wood on the Jeff Beck albums playing bass guitar.
Ronnie was that Beckola record.
Yeah, exactly.
On that record is brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool stuff. Yeah, great notes.
Yeah.
Again, like
and talk about not holding back. Talk about 1,000 notes, but they're great.
And the sound too.
Yeah,
horrid sound, but it works beautifully.
See, I wouldn't call that horrid.
Horrid. Is that an oxymoron? Beautifully horrid. I love it.
So I'm good. Anything else anybody wants to talk about, or you just want to say we've had enough of this nonsense?
Everybody, please vote.
Yes, please vote.
vote your asses off.
Yeah, let's go for that. Everybody wear a fucking mask.
Please.
Please.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's such a no-brainer.
Thank
you. This was lovely. This was absolutely. This was lovely. I really enjoyed it.
All you guys,
yeah.
Great.
Lovely, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for doing
Mark,
it.
It was lovely to meet you, Mark.
Yeah, great.
Will.
Lovely to meet you all again.
It would be nice to see you all again in the real world.
All right.
Okay.
Let's
take care, guys.
Ivy and Bertrand. Will.
Yes.
Please say hi to Ivy and Bertrand. Send them my love.
I absolutely will, Mark.
Please.
Love you, man.
Love you too.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Eventide, and good night and goodbye.
Thank you, Eventide.
Thanks, Eventide.